Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for the warm welcome and for your presence gathering this morning. Just the spirit. When we were saying the first song, I kept hearing, "I want to know your names," and so I kept changing it in my head to say, "What is your name?" And then I stand here and I'm like, this looks very much like a hall in my hometown of Hornbeck, Louisiana. It is a town of 450. It was the Optimist Club. And if you will imagine that at one point, for me to be able to travel to Africa when I was 15, we had a benefit roping, like horse roping. So I grew up in the red dirt roads of Louisiana, and joining you now as a resident of Portland, Oregon for the past 5 years. And so rooted is a really deep word for me, and so when you even hear the Spirit of Life song, you hear roots hold me close, and then your song, friends, so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that gift. Yeah. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about rooted and uprooted. We know that loss is a type of uprootedness, and so I just want to honor that you're holding that uprootedness now. And she said, I don't know, I like a good southern draw, so maybe I would have loved to have met her. So one of my Christmas gifts this year was the book Rooted by Leanda Lynn Hopt. Anybody read this book yet? I consumed it as quickly as the vacation hours and mothering adventures would allow. My wife and I have 3 boys, and so I stay pretty busy. The one is pretty grown at this point, but the baby is 9, and the 13-year-old is gonna survive 7th grade, I think. And so as I worked through my intention setting for this year, it became apparent that the word rooted would be my anchor word for the year. My theme, if you will. I was nearing 5 years in this new land called Oregon. The heartache of leaving Houston, a place we called home for 13 years, had finally dissipated, and the feelings of deep connection and gratitude were pervasive in my spirit. I love that liminal space between Christmas and New Year's. One of my other favorite Christmas gifts, and I didn't bring it, I should have, but it's a little sticker maker. It's called an ivy. Anybody got an ivy? It makes little stickers like this. It is the cutest thing, and I love it so much. It brings me more delight than I can express. But anyway, I was going to use it to make a sticker with my word for the year and a meaningful image of rootedness. And so I take a lot of pictures of trees. Anybody resonate with that? Okay, all right, lots of pictures of trees. So I'm going through looking at pictures, and the tree I chose, I say maybe it chose me, was a crepe myrtle that I had saw at the Houston Arboretum, and it was over 100 years old. Crepe myrtles can look like a bush, or they can look like a tree, and it had these really beautiful roots, and it was also a tree that I grew up with abundantly in Louisiana. They are everywhere in Louisiana, so in some ways, this tree represented my journey, the journey toward rootedness, toward belonging, toward finding home. There's no coincidences, I don't guess, but I smiled at the irony of the symbolism, and I printed the sticker and put it in my journal. I was here in Oregon, home, and I carried Texas and Louisiana in my heart as homes as well. The intention I set for the year was that the deep knowing that I am okay would infuse my living, that my goodness would be of service to others, that my friendships would be abundant and sweet, that adventure would deepen my bonds with my boys, that the feeling of peace in my heart right now would fill my days and overflow to others, that I would trust myself to fully step into my role as a leader, and finally, that the beauty of each day would be named and praised with gratitude. I was feeling deeply rooted, and my word took on even more magic sentiment when I received a Christmas card from my sister, Angela, who lives in Louisiana still. And as I opened the card, a small tree trinket fell out into my hands. She couldn't have known my word for the year was rooted. I had just selected it. However, in this small gift, I felt the arms of love wrapping me in a depth of gratitude I wanted to hold on to forever. The trinket came with a little quote. May you find daily strength in the fact that you are deeply rooted in your faith and in the importance of kindness, compassion, perseverance, and courage. As the old proverb says, when the roots are deep, there is no reason to fear the wind. Deeply rooted, firmly established. Have you had moments like this in your life, in your journey, where you felt so deeply rooted, grateful, peaceful? I love being there, in the center of my life, breathing, balanced, beaming love, and the taste of sweet goodness. I felt deeply rooted. As the Thich Nhat Hanh quote mantra goes, I am home, I have arrived. What are the roots that hold you? Perhaps who? What practices, communities, books, life experiences? My roots, my family, both chosen and related. My friends. I often say friendship is my hobby, so be careful. Reading, learning, adventures, and community. If you had to name 3, what would they be? If we were in retreat, we would actually do this together, but just hold 3.
Family.
Or say 3. So, with the glow of New Year still shining in my soul as holiday time and vacation time came to a close, an ice and windstorm hit Portland. My 13-year-old Eli and I noticed that our 120-foot Doug fir seemed to be swaying a bit more than we thought was normal. I was curious, but I wasn't particularly worried, as I'd seen her roots, some of them more than a foot in diameter. How could roots like those not hold? I mean, this wasn't just any Douglas fir. This was actually my friend and my colleague. When the pandemic hit and my team and I moved to remote work, this Douglas fir, became a constant in my Zoom world. When I met new people, especially folks from other states, they would gasp and speak to her beauty. And I would casually move to the side a bit and say, isn't she amazing? I am so lucky. I remember watching fir cones grow on her. Like, pandemic time was different, right? I mean, I was watching. And I do want to say that I spoke recently at the UUA Fellowship in Newport and was corrected that they were not pine cones on the fir tree, but fir cones. So I just thank you, UUA Newport. I watched fir cones grow. I would get on a Zoom and be look at what she's doing now. My team named her at one point. I don't remember the name chosen because to me she was just a constant, a friend. In fact, while reading Rooted, one of the practices the author recommends is to pick a tree and hug the tree every day. At least that's what I remember she said anyway. So I picked this Douglas fir as the target of my affection. But being that it was winter, raining, cold, muddy, and well, in the 2 weeks between the intention setting and the storm, I never made it down to implement the practice. And then there she was, swaying side to side, an unnatural movement for someone so grand. I worried she would fall, but oddly enough, I never worried she would come toward our home. And fall she did. Or rather, it's like she decided to fall into the arms of another. Her uprootedness, she fell into the arms of a deodar cedar that held this big tree. She leaned her tip-top on the somewhat narrow tip-top of the cedar. I'm profoundly grateful she did not fall toward our home. Others were not so lucky in this storm. Her size and proximity to our house would have been catastrophic. In some ways, I wonder if she knew to fall away from us, from me, her friend, her daily witness. Gravity likely dictated the trajectory, but it felt like a gift and feels like a gift nonetheless. And then, because I'm a meaning maker, like most humans, the irony of uprooting of my favorite tree and the holding of my new word, rooted, began to take shape. My rootedness, my sticker, my mantra, my image of leaving home to find home once again, uprooted. Even as I typed this story, tears filled my eyes. I hated losing the tree. I could not watch when they came to take her down. And she's still in the yard because it is very expensive to remove a tree that size. My 9-year-old shepherd counted her rings. At least 60 years old she was. And her uprootedness has become a teacher for me, and thus a gift. Life moves in cycles, spirals, seasons, waves. This is a piece that I did at a courage retreat. I'm not exactly an artist, but it's a way of holding perspective about the journey we travel on. Sometimes we're at the center, sometimes we're always moving in this way. When was the last time you felt uprooted? Or perhaps you're in a place of uprootedness right now. Think for a moment. We know that there's different levels of uprootedness. Some, like, had the tree fallen on our house, or when death, illness hits. Uprootedness can shatter our heart. There are levels of uprootedness that the mystics call dark nights of the soul. The feeling of connection to self, others so distant. One of my darkest nights of the soul was coming out. I was a new seminary student at Baylor University, having been the homecoming queen of the Baptist University in Louisiana College. And I fell in love. And I knew in that moment that I would be exiled. But I also knew, because of the free church tradition, that I could trust my knowing, and that if it were true, and it was true, that I was going to stand no matter what in that exile. And exile was hard. It was a dark night of the soul. In many ways, I still live in exile from my hometown, the town that raised me in so many ways, so distant now. And then there are times of uprootedness that are less shattering and perhaps are invitational. Uprootedness can be an invitation to growth. Is there a change you need to make in your life, your relationships, your work? Moving from Houston to Oregon was that kind of uprooting for me. In fact, there was even a poem that served as a guide during my discernment process about moving. And if we think about, I don't know Phoebe's poetry, but if I did, I would have tried to figure out if she had one here. But this one is from Diana Chapman Walsh, and it's called Pot Bound. Anybody heard this one? He asked me a question I've never considered before. When is it that you know you have to go someplace else? At first, I think I don't know. Don't go. Never have. Just try to please do what's expected. Bloom where I'm planted. But then the answer germinates in the soil of my mind. I see a potted plant, root protruding from the drainage hole in the bottom, ready to go, has to grow. I run down to the cellar and root around for a larger pot. A little larger only, so my vulnerable plant won't wilt in the unstructured vastness of a new world without apparent walls. I have to smash the old pot to rescue my rested plant. Impacted root system now naked in my hand. Naked. There's I need to take that out of my, I don't know how to say it any other way. A small sacrifice, but a radical operation. To deliver the plant from death without the space to grow, it will shrivel and die. When is it that I know I have to go someplace else? When is it I have to grow or die? This poem spoke to me where I was pot-bound, needing a new container. I, a mystic, was watching and waiting for a new call. And I wrote about it. I don't know if you know the quote that talks about the stars are pulling my hair again, the Anis Nan quote. And it felt like that. My hair was being pulled by the stars. So it's curious to think about nature, of stars calling and roots growing, disruption of another kind. Do you listen? Yes, but then there's fear. Fear of failing, fear of more work or less work. I tried to use the same pot. I wanted to keep things safe, to keep it together. I tried to choose my own pot. I tried to use the pot that others thought that I should use. Smaller pots, but yet the stars kept pulling my hair, kept demanding and reminding that the lack of energy was a sign, the lack of connection. But then I realized that to break the pot that I had outgrown, I had to fully live into that space. I could no longer pretend I hadn't outgrown. I had to bloom where I was, to learn to fully lead and love where I was root-bound and all. Because finding a new pot wasn't something I could do. It was the work of the stars. And so I went through this process of discerning the move. And when I say that I love the community in Houston I had built, I love the community in Houston, and I still do. And it was heartbreaking to leave, but the abundance of what I've found in this new land is remarkable. The depth of connection and possibility and love. And so in the breaking of the old pot, if you will, my new pot really seems like a mosaic pieced together by the stars, if you will, held together by their dusty glow. A pot that changes when we need it to. And I feel like I'm the broken pot pieced together by the magic of love. And it is love and growth to help others learn to trust the stars and to hold it all together as well. I had a religion professor in undergrad, Dr. Heath, that would say, "We are all cracked pots." He would sometimes stand on the table. And perhaps it is as and through cracked pots that real life and magic can be found. So those words written 5 years ago could really be penned about my life right now. With my beloved Douglas fir lying in the background, I'm actually moving to a new pot. So I am the executive director of a statewide children's organization called Our Children Oregon. How do we nurture a state where all children are valued as our children? It's a beautiful organization, a beautiful mission. I welcome you to log on and sign up to be activated for the change that our kids need in Salem. I merged two organizations to launch it. It's colorful and beautiful and has hearts embedded in the branding. And I'm actually resigned from that role and will be remaining in Oregon, but I'm gonna try a new pot out and work in the state. I'll be working for Texas, not the state of Texas, for climate resilience, community engagement, democratic efforts to build resilience in the face of a lot of hard things happening in the state. It wasn't a role I sought, but it was a role that came to me. So it feels a little risky, and also a whole new lesson in holding the both and. That I can be here in the new home and do service to where I feel like is most urgently needed. It's 5 years as an executive director. Is there any executive directors in the, I know there's at least one other, has had many gifts and many lessons of releasing and allowing, of dreaming and believing, of witnessing the cost and the gift of transformation. And now, as I walk toward a chosen uprootedness, toward a new container, I feel the familiar anticipation, curiosity, and perhaps delight. Less fearful now of new pots. I've learned that beauty is found in the risk, the leap, the believing. So what are we to do and to make of a rooted life? The fragility, the magic, the joy, the sorrow. What does it mean to live a rooted life? I turned to the book that was gifted me for my word of the year, And Leanda writes, rootedness is a way of being in concert with the wilderness and wildness that sustains humans and all life. The rooted pathways are way markers and fortification for all seeking our unique, bewildering, awkward way through the essential question of how to live on our broken, imperiled, beloved earth. As Mary Oliver wrote, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? The word rooted's own root is the Latin radix, the center from which all things germinate and arise. The radix is the radical, the intrinsic, organic, fervent heart of being in action. Rooted lives are radically intertwined with the vitality of the planet. It makes our lives the most foundational form of activism. It means everything we do matters, and matters wondrously. In this, we find that to be rooted has very little to do with the depth of soil we find ourselves in, with whether we stand in the face of the storm, or whether we fall into the arms of another, or even perhaps on our knees. You see, a rooted life is a life of living deeply connected to your own core, to your center of being, to that which is most true of you, no matter the storms one might face, or the pots one might inhabit. A rooted life means that I can be an Oregonian, a Texan, and a Louisianan all at once. That I can be queer, Southern, ordained, progressive, mother, daughter, sister, friend, life pacifist, fighter for justice, critical of the progressive movement and the othering sometimes found within, as well as critical of the conservative movement's fascist energies and harm found therein. I can be called too Texas for the Pacific Northwest and too liberal for Texas. I can be exiled from belonging in my hometown, and I can offer a sermon saying goodbye to a loved one at the First Baptist Church of that same town. My roots are not dependent upon any of those things, because a rooted life is about finding a belonging beyond the circumstances of the journey. It is about finding and listening to the truth of who we each are. Have you listened for that truth in yourself recently? What is core to who you are? What is the radix that holds you no matter what? I offer you the blessing once again found in my Christmas card. May you find daily strength in the fact that you are deeply rooted in faith and in the importance of kindness, compassion, perseverance, and courage. As the old proverb says, when the roots are deep, there is no reason to fear the wind. Deeply rooted, firmly established. Courage comes from core, which is your heart. May you live deeply rooted in the core of who you are, and may you know that it is so, so good. Thank you.